And go live. You're live on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. Appreciate everybody who showed up and wants to be in our audience and hear our conversations. We do this every Wednesday at 11:55 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll tell you a little bit in a few minutes about who our special guest is. Before we get started, I want to remind everybody Lunch Conversations is sponsored in part by the Elder Law Firm. The Elder Law Firm can help you with your commitments to your loved ones. So you have anybody in your family and your life that you feel that you should offer to help them in some way or another with estate planning or elder care planning, reach out to the Elder Law Firm at 336-396-4551. And remember, you must tell them that Randy sent you to them. Ooh. Yeah.
Pressure's on them.
Randy, you doing all right?
Yeah, I am. It's a Wednesday and we're halfway through the week. One of my highlights of the week, by the way.
Should I go ahead and explain my bling? So
yeah, why don't you do that? You've accessorized your wardrobe very smartly, I might add. So what's the story behind that?
So this is a PSA, which stands for, in this case, public service announcement. And I'm wearing this, and I had this surgery done just to tell everybody this. You only get one skin. Protect it. Lida and Randy and I were talking about this before the show. Use sunscreen, wear hats, do what you need to do to protect your skin. Otherwise, you end up at a surgery center and you get a basal cell carcinoma or something worse taken off your head. Fortunately for me, it was a basal cell carcinoma, and I'm going to be absolutely glorious when I get done.
You will be fabulous, my friend. Hey, that was your birthday present to yourself, wasn't it?
It was my birthday present to myself.
Congratulations, man. I'll tell you what, that's awesome.
Hey, tell the audience who the heck you are, buddy.
Hey, Randy Wooden with Goodwill Industries of Northwest North Carolina and director of our professional center here in Winston-Salem. Happy to help you if you're in a job search, whether you're here in the Triad or where Lida is out in Colorado. We've got clients across the country and we do work by appointment. So find me on LinkedIn, reach out, and we're happy to try to help you get to wherever it is you want to go. And best of all, it's free. How about that? Yeah. Hey, we've got a great guest. We're going to introduce Lida here in a second, but she's been here before and backed by popular demand. The hordes are awaiting. But here's the thing. We have a presence about ourselves, our narrative, our presence at work, in the job search, and you don't want to leave that to chance. And we've all seen people in the news who have, let's just say, stepped in it to varying degrees. And so there's then the old damage control. So whether you're doing some damage control to try to repair your brand, if you will, or you're trying to just do the right thing. We're going to get a lot of advice and tips from Lida today. We invite you, if you have questions or comments, to put those in the chat box, and Teddy will monitor that and work those in as we go. So Lida Citroën, did I get that right? I got Lida right.
You got them both right.
I did. Lida, you coming all the way from Denver, Colorado, the home of the Broncos and the world champion Avalanche.
Yes.
So welcome, by the way, and welcome back. And why don't you introduce yourself in a little more detail?
Thank you so much,
Randy,
Teddy. Thank you for having me back all the way from Denver. Yes, we were talking about the championship that our teams just won, and we're hoping to get another one in February. But my name is Lida Citroën, and I serve many purposes. I'm a speaker, I'm an author, and I'm an executive coach. And I get to help people control their narrative, build a positive perception of who they are so that they can advance their career, they can make a better impact in their community, and they can write a legacy that is most meaningful to them. Because as you said, everyone has a personal brand, either by design or by default. I help people design it.
Yeah,
you do. And I see you've got a couple of books or so behind you. So I know you mentioned you're an author. So why don't we share a little bit about what you do there? You do a lot of work with veterans, by the way, too, I understand.
Yeah. I do. That is a passion project for me. That's actually what my first TED Talk was about. And if anybody's curious, it's 12 minutes and it really kind of walks through experience of being a civilian who found a way to thank those who've served and offer my expertise and help them transition, help them understand personal branding.
Yeah, and that could be a challenge. And I work with folks transitioning from not just military to civilian, but also from one industry to another, or from the private, nonprofit to for-profit. And there are always some concerns out there. So thank you for doing what you do. And I'm sure many, many vets have thanked you as well, because it's especially that first transition can be the toughest one. That's what I've come to experience. That very first one can be really, really challenging. So, all right. So folks, let's put your seatbelt on. Let's go and find out more about all of the whole narrative thing. First of all, if you would share a little bit about the why for you. Just you love what you do, and how did that all come about?
Well, I had spent 20 years in the corporate world, right? Wearing many hats, but most of the hats were under marketing, business development, PR, branding, positioning. And so I got really good at helping companies tell their stories in meaningful and profitable ways to target markets. Okay. And in 2008, the economy's crashing around me, and I became a business owner, right? Became an entrepreneur. Who does that? I did. But I thought, instead of just helping companies, what would it be like to help people? And in 2008, personal branding was not a household word like it is today. But took all those skills that I had developed in the corporate world and just applied them to human beings, and found it to be so much richer, so much more interesting, because we're not good at telling our story. We're not good at taking control of the way we want people to see us. And that's really what I've done now for 14 years. And what's really cool is it's not an American conversation. My clients are all over the world, from Argentina to Poland to the UAE and Australia. So helping people within those cultures really tell the story of who they are and be proactive about the way that they're perceived is what helps us succeed in our career. We don't want to be an afterthought. We want to be the first conversation.
Hey, let's define some terms here. And this may sound sort of simplistic, I suppose, but let's just, so everybody understands, you talk about control the narrative. When you say narrative, what is that? What do you mean by that?
Well, we all have a story, right? And it's the story of who we are. And maybe to this point, your story is not looking so great. Well, open a new chapter. Control the narrative means take charge over the story that is told about you. We hear the term used in the media, and gosh, I wish I had a license on that term, because it's every other word, but it is all about taking control, right? Because people will form perception whether we're driving that or not. And perception is a human trait. It's part of judgment and bias and stereotypes. We form perception. We've known somebody like you, or we got a bad first impression, and that's how we perceive you. And perception matters, because if I don't perceive you the way that you want, I could make decisions that are not in your best interest. I could withhold opportunities or resources simply because of that perception. And that perception can be wrong. It can be based on misinformation or incomplete information. Yet that perception that I have of you is going to determine whether I want to move forward and give you what it is you need.
All right.
So it matters.
So Teddy, Teddy, microphone is.
We need to first and foremost understand for ourselves what that narrative should be. And too often, I think a lot of business professionals align their narrative with who they truly are. And then that becomes painful, because they're not getting what they hope to get out of conversations and meeting and networking, because they mispackaged their own narrative. What are your thoughts on that?
Teddy, I love that, because you're so right? How many of your listeners introduce themselves as, I'm Joe Smith, I own the deli, or I'm Joe Smith and I represent this company, and here's what the company does. So we lead with what we do and not who we are, what we care about, what makes us different, what makes us interesting and memorable. We lead with our job title and our job description. And that's not unique. That's not how we want to be defined. So that's where I come in and I help people strip away the who, what, when, and where, and then reassemble it in a way that's more meaningful.
Yeah. And
Maybe
one
we can
more, if I may-
repackage Teddy and me today. We can,
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's
Do we have 2
one-
hours, 3 hours? I don't know how long it takes.
We don't have that much time to fix it all. Here's one more little thing I'll throw in this conversation about developing our narrative. And that is, too often people downplay ourselves. Here's one of the pet peeves, and Randy knows what this is. One of my pet peeves that a lot of people use. They put the word just in front of who they are. And that makes me whimper. Yeah.
It's like offering an opinion and saying, I think, or just don't qualify. Don't give somebody else an opportunity to form a negative impression.
Yeah.
Here's one that I guess I wonder a little bit about, and that is something you said earlier about others may perceive you, and their perception is their reality. That's how they perceive you.
Right.
And I may be like Forrest Gump and just kind of bumpity, 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 bump and go through life. How do I get tactfully, how do I get to learn what other people's perceptions are of me so that I can say, wait a second, that's not how I want to be perceived. And then we'll also cover the steps you can work through to get to where you want to be. So how do you figure out if you're on the right track or not to begin with?
Well, and the process I use is called perception mapping, and it's probably more robust than somebody can do for themselves. But let me share what you could do for yourself. And when I started my business, I did exactly what you're talking about, because I had a 20-year runway behind me of a lot of success and a lot of accomplishments, but I didn't know what the perception was. I knew what it looked like on paper. And what people could do, which is what I did, is just ask people, right? People that you trust, but not just people who are going to say what they think you want to hear. I asked people, what is it that makes me unique and memorable? What are some keywords or some phrases you would use to describe who I am and what I do? And I didn't lead the witness. I asked the questions to let people know that I was trying to build my brand. And candidly, Randy, what I got back was not what I was expecting, which is often the case for my clients. We all think everybody loves us. And people, acknowledged the successes I had, but they mentioned that I had perhaps hurt some people's feelings along the way through some of my behaviors, as I was so passionate about growing my career that I didn't realize that I had stepped on some toes. And that feedback is never easy to hear. But it's so valuable, because when you map feedback around how you're known, the opportunities somebody might use to refer you into, or keywords, key phrases that they describe you by, and then you map that against what you ultimately want for your reputation, which we call desired brand or ideal end state, then you sit there and say, okay, words like hurt people's feelings and not collaborative, that's not how I want to be known. So then I have to take steps to make sure I correct that going forward. I never would have known that when I started my business, and I probably would have repeated the same behaviors had I not gotten that feedback. So it's always makes us feel vulnerable to get feedback, but it's so valuable to being able to know what the perception is.
Yeah, and it's sometimes hard to hear that, as you say, and so the hesitancy then becomes, hey, I'm not going to go there. I'm just going to try to do the best that I know to do. And I think I'm guilty of that, to be candid. I don't relish getting negative feedback. I'm not sure anybody really does. And, the only one here perfect is Teddy. I mean, look, Teddy has got it all going on, but guys like me, we're just trying to get by.
Well, I offer Randy, Lida, that's powerful. Be willing. Randy and I earlier talked about 360-degree evaluations. You need to listen to the words that people use when you're collecting this input, because often the tone and how they say it and the words they use can sometimes have just as much of an impact on what you're hearing as the statement they made. And
I don't want to make it sound like the feedback is primarily negative.
Oh, no, whichever way it is.
Right. And my clients are always nervous, right? That, oh gosh, people are going to sling, arrows. And that rarely happens, because when you make yourself vulnerable and you say, look, I'm trying to grow as a professional, as a person, can you give me some honest feedback? People usually are sensitive to that. And this isn't, and this is not a classic 360 either.
It's different,
You know, those have to be administered by someone who knows how to do them. You can't do that for yourself. But what is so cool is that oftentimes people reveal things we didn't know they saw. And that has happened to so many of my clients. It's like, I didn't know they knew that I was passionate about that, or I didn't know they picked up that, you know, that was an opportunity for me. And so it makes us feel vulnerable to ask those questions, but what we get back is gold, and it is amazing. And if you do it for yourself, you know, in my books, I walk readers through how to do feedback for yourself, or if you're working with a coach or somebody, make sure that you take the parts of the feedback that are relevant to where you want to go. Because there's parts that we don't need to pay attention to. I get a lot of feedback on my driving. I don't change the way I drive.
Well, I'm glad you live in Denver and I live here.
I'm a good driver. I just might go a little slower than the people in the lane. But feedback is powerful. And so I appreciate that you added that.
All right. So you did this back in 08, 09, whatever, when you get down this path of starting your own gig, right? So now, do you kind of fine tune yourself over the years and continue to get feedback to say, hey, you know, I've kind of eradicated that issue, but guess what else popped up? And so now I've got to work on that. Is this kind of an ongoing thing for you?
It absolutely should be. And,
Okay.
and I'm probably guilty of, you know, taking care of my clients and taking care of my team. And maybe I don't do it often enough, but I get feedback, right? Whether it's feedback on social media, hey, that message didn't resonate, or whether it's feedback from clients going, I don't understand. And I'm always fine tuning, because none of us, I mean, we're not at the end. So we're constantly working towards that desired reputation. And when I get feedback and somebody says to me, you know, I just love how you focus on gratitude. Well, cha-ching, you know, that's a key word I want to be known for: gratitude and generosity. It's in the title of my TED Talk, because they're important to me. And getting feedback where people start using the terms and the phrases that I want to be known by, that's also a form of feedback. So that's ongoing, definitely.
All right. Let's, unless there is a question or comment that you want to work in there. Yeah.
Donald asked a question about, and I asked him for a little bit more clarity, but the question is just, what adjectives can we use that are strong or powerful, but don't come off as egotistical? And I think he means, what adjectives can we use in reference to speaking about ourselves? Does that make sense?
It does. And I think context is important, right? When we're talking about a LinkedIn headline, that's one thing. When we're talking about an elevator pitch, or we're talking about a conversation, if the whole conversation is me, and look at how great I am and look at everything I've done, that's going to come across egotistical. Yeah. But when it comes across as passion and enthusiasm and confidence, that's not egotistical. That's someone who's clear about their direction, and it empowers others when they go to introduce you to say, oh, you've got to meet Lida. Here's what she's passionate about. Here's what she's good at. And here's where she's headed. I think that aligns with what you're looking for. And therefore you need to meet each other. Yeah. We're empowering people when we're clear.
Do you find that gender plays a role or some barriers when, let's say, females are, you know, more passionate, assertive, because again, people perceive certain, perceive people in certain ways. And so is there a gender discrepancy or anything that maybe females need to be more aware of in how they are perceived versus maybe how a male is perceived?
I don't know about the perception piece, because I've got some male clients who are extraordinarily passionate. I mean, if you met them in an airport, you both end up crying because they're so passionate about their cause or their issue. I think culture plays a role. I think gender plays a role. I think upbringing and environment plays a role. I mean, there's so many, and that's why I love the fact that I work in different cultures. So if I have a client from India, or a client from Japan, or a client from Poland or Canada or the US, my job is to navigate the cultural nuances. When it comes to social media, we've got to play pretty consistently. But when it comes to in-person networking, and to Don's point, the words that might sound egotistical, and I cover that in my book, Control the Narrative, because my clients have definitely pushed back where something feels like tall poppy syndrome or fig jam, which I'll let you read the book to know what that stands for. And, things that there's certain cultural norms that say, don't push yourself too far out. Right. In the US, we push those boundaries, but other cultures, not so much. And the male-female dynamic is certainly at play when you layer the cultural piece on top.
So COVID has made us all aware of what we share. You mentioned social media, and a lot of us were cooped up in our palatial estates for the better part of 2 years, and so a lot of things swirl around social media, and so we tend to be a little, let's just say, amped up at times, perhaps. Let's talk a little bit about social media. Guidelines, tips, what to keep private, what to share, that kind of a thing, and just take it any way you want to take it from that topic. But social media can be a big plus, and it can also be a negative.
It absolutely can. Yeah. And it's interesting. I penned an article for Entrepreneur Magazine at the end of 2019. So even before the pandemic sent us all home, about how much do you have to share on social media to still be seen as authentic. And the article is now on my blog. So if you don't have a subscription to Entrepreneur, you can go to my blog and read it. Yeah. Because I wrestle with that. And what I shared was I lost the person who I was closest to. I lost my father. And I didn't want to have to post that on social media. I didn't want to have to tell the whole world that I was going through this grief and all of that. But people that knew me pushed back and said, well, you owe it to your followers. And I thought, do I owe that? Can I be authentic without having to tell people everything? And my answer is yes, you absolutely can. I've chosen to make certain things public. And I encourage every client, every listener, make those choices, because once you make them public, you don't get to pull them back. And authenticity is not the same thing as transparency. When you ask me a question, I've got to give you an honest answer, or I've got to say, I'm not comfortable answering that, because if I fake it, then I'm not being authentic. But I don't have to tell you every hope, dream, fear, and rash I've ever had, right? And we don't have to do that. There's no rule book that says we have to. And that is where a lot of people got in trouble during COVID.
Were you looking at Teddy when you said rash? I just was wondering what Teddy got that look at.
But there are a lot of people who just don't understand, and they're happy to share that kind of stuff. And I got a conversation come up here in the not too distant future about why do people do this? And there are lots of reasons. There's not just,
there are,
Yep.
And we should. I mean, I think we build community when we share our realness, right? So, when I did finally share on Facebook that I was going through a grieving process, the amount of support and love was amazing. But I needed to be in charge of that decision, not have it be an obligation. And I think more people would be served to think through. People revealed addiction issues. They revealed all sorts of traumas. And we see that whenever there's headlines, right? Recent headlines, people are sharing things about themselves. You don't get to pull that back. So just be really clear about your comfort level. If you're going to share very personal information, you make it public to your customers, your clients, your employees, your employer, and you don't get to take it back.
And I'm seeing, and I know, Teddy, you probably would agree with me, and Lida, I'm sure you would too. LinkedIn, for example, it's really changed in the last couple of years. A whole lot more of what I'd call personal experiences on there. It used to be more businessy, informational, that kind of thing. And now there's a lot of stuff that it's changed. And I'm not going to say it's good or bad. I'll leave that to, somebody at a higher pay grade, but I have seen that change. And so I think that's what you're talking about, isn't it? Like, hey, you know what? I suffered addiction and I'm 6 years sober now, or you're seeing that. And, for me, a little bit of that goes a long way. But I can just scroll past it. I'm not going to jump on and go, this doesn't belong here. This is Facebook. I don't do that. A lot
of people do. A lot of people
they do.
Belong.
Yeah.
And I think, and I work closely with LinkedIn. I think they're showing some grace to people who might still be hurting from the last 2 years. I think some of us may feel like we've moved on and we're back to business and we're traveling and we're doing things that were pre-COVID. But I think they're showing some grace. And I think they definitely did during the pandemic, because people were isolated. People were looking for community. They were looking for conversation. And you saw all the social platforms change in a positive way, right? People didn't feel alone. They felt like there was somebody on the other end of a webcam. But yeah, that's LinkedIn is a professional site. So you are seeing people push back on the religious posts, on the political posts, here's my dog and here's my kid and here's our vacation.
Rash I have.
Yeah.
Now, Lida, LinkedIn is also smart enough to know the more they can create community, the better off they're going to be. And community means you have to, my word, you have to allow peeling back of the layers a little bit and get a little vulnerable and share some of that personal. Personally, for me, I don't mind a little bit of that. I think a little bit of that is okay. If every day you show up and you tell me, that you had grape nuts or you didn't have grape nuts, et cetera, then I'm going to quickly unfollow you because you peel back too many layers.
Well, we want to know that the people that we're following, the people we're connecting with are real.
Yeah.
And, LinkedIn has been a great platform for me. My followership is growing exponentially every day. And I've got courses in the LinkedIn Learning Library, which a lot of people are enjoying and getting certifications on. I mean, it's been my biggest platform. And I will say that as much as I share tips and helpful information and insights and resources, and people love those and they engage with them, when I share something that's more intimate or personal, those results go off the charts. But I'm very much in control of how much of that goes out, because I'm managing my brand. I'm controlling the way people see me, and that isn't disingenuous. I'm not hiding things. I'm just showing pieces of myself and my life that are relevant. And I think if more of us took that approach, then cancel culture wouldn't be so big and we'd be more in control. That isn't I'm not being fake. And I'm not encouraging people to be fake. I'm just saying, be a little more mindful of the perception you're creating.
I know I post a good bit, and a lot of it's all job hunt related stuff, because that's my brand and I want to be known as the job hunt guy. But some of the most liked and commented on posts, one was of we build these gargantuan sandcastles every summer, and at Memorial Day we built a huge flag, boots, rifles, full color. We painted, and that thing got and it had nothing to do with business. Had nothing, it was this is just a glimpse of something I enjoy doing. And so anyway, that struck me. And also, Teddy, remember that time I threw the opening pitch to the baseball game?
Some people might call that throw. Others may not call it.
I about knocked the hot dog out of the fan's hand there. It was so wild, but that got a lot of you. And I'm thinking, holy cow, here I am busting my tail to crank out all this, what I'll call relevant stuff. And the little Randy thing on the pitcher's mound, it was off the charts. So, hey, Teddy, we're almost halfway through. What was the speed of my pitch? Well, the old joke in baseball is they timed it with a sundial. So remember what a sundial is? That's how. Let's just say my days as a lefty reliever for the Red Sox, that ship has sailed. So I guess I have to be okay with that. I don't know, but I'd like to go back and try, but the phone they haven't called. So Dean, that's how the speed of my pitch was. Let's say was not going to scare anybody. Yeah. Put it that way. Hey, Teddy, we're about halfway through. You want to take the break now?
Or you want to go ahead and do it? You can open up the next talking point. So, hey, you're on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. Our special guest today is Lida Citroën. I'm trying, Lida. Hey, this show is sponsored in part by the Elder Law Firm. I love this statement. You hear me say it every week. What's important to you and how you plan to honor your responsibilities to them is also important to the elder law firm. So reach out to them if you know anybody in your family or your life that needs estate planning, elder care planning, et cetera, et cetera. Reach out and have a conversation with the elder law firm in Greensboro, North Carolina, 336-396-4551. And you know the rule. You must tell them that Randy sent you. Back to you, buddy.
Who started that rule, Teddy? Was that you?
Dude, I'm in complete control.
Yeah. All right, sure. I get you. I get you. All right, we're gonna go waist deep in it now. We're gonna dive into not taboo topics, but I'll call it controversial topics. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to have seen things in the news in the last 6, 8, 10, 12, 18 months. Everything from Supreme Court decisions to inflation to other political issues to social justice, you name it. I mean, there's tons of them. In fact, we're going to do a show on that topic in August, but I understand that that's one of your big, I guess, asks that people have now is how do we as companies, I'll use the word contend with or work through limiting or harnessing in some way some of those conversations so they don't detract from the workplace. I'm not sure if I'm wording that right, but so if you're coaching an employer, what are some guidelines that you may offer them, suggestions to say, okay, here's how you may want to allow for discussion on some of these controversial topics?
And it is a big conversation.
Yeah.
You know, the executive voice, the company voice, they should all be rooted in values. And the way that I advise is if you're clear about your values, right? What do you stand for? What is your moral operating system? What set of principles do you go forward through, right? And you're really clear about those and you communicate those and you act according to them, right? Because it's not just about lip service. You've got to act accordingly.
Right.
Then you start building credibility for those values and for that way that you are. When a topic hits within those values, then you might feel a sense of obligation to respond or at least comment. And that makes sense, right? It's in your wheelhouse. It's in your space. So if the conversation is around cancel culture, if the conversation is around perception, if the conversation is around gratitude and being generous, that's my wheelhouse. I feel an obligation personally to make a comment, respond, do something. But if it's not, I don't feel we have to be visible in the public sense about our opinions. Again, it goes back to being strategic. And we've seen companies sort of jump into trending topics prematurely or maybe opportunistically. And that doesn't bode well because then the consumer, the audience is going, wait a minute. I thought you were in this business. Why are you commenting on this? This has nothing to do with what you tell me you as a company stand for, or you as an executive, a leader are passionate about. Why are you talking about this over here? And recently what I've started noticing is almost a social demand that anyone who has any level of influence has to comment on everything.
Yeah.
And I don't understand that. I don't agree with that. And I think that is where we can get tripped up. And not just from a perception standpoint, but it's requiring people to respond maybe when they haven't thought things through. The recent Supreme Court decision was very triggering for some people and very upsetting. And do I want to see those influencers come out and give me their just immediate, impression or thoughts? I would rather somebody think about it and be a little bit intentional. So I don't really understand where that pressure is coming from.
Yeah. And companies, I mean, back in the old day, and I've said this on our show before, I mean, back in the old days, back when I was a kid, if you had a good product, good service at a fair price, and you stood behind your product, that was about all that was looked at or all that was required. And now it's, you're standing in the community, or environmentally sound, and a whole host of other topics that customers and also employees look at to say, is this a company I'd like to be aligned with or to purchase from? And so companies feel like they can't ride the fence and be silent. They have to jump one way or the other. And, you use the word opportunistic, and I don't disagree with you. I think, at some point you got to say, I remember Michael Jordan years ago with his Air Jordan shoes. He's a popular guy, in case you didn't know, pretty popular dude here in North Carolina. And he's a Democrat, and, the Democratic Party, it said, dude, why don't you run for office? I mean, why don't you speak out on politics, and why don't you do all this stuff? And he goes, you know what? He said, I'm a business guy. And he says, both Republicans and Democrats buy my shoes. And I've always remembered that. And because you can have everybody's got their own views. We don't live under a shell, but does that have to necessarily be part of the product that you're selling? And, some argue that it should be. I mean, but others would argue that it's not really relevant. So.
Well, and a lot of that is coming from younger generations, because we are seeing, the Gen, whatever you want to call them now, they are looking to make sure that they support companies that support their values, that they work for companies, that they help promote and advocate for companies or communities that support their values. So from that standpoint, I understand. But I just think these have to be really carefully thought out decisions, and not just knee-jerk reactions. It's going to make Me Too mean something else. If everybody just goes, my company too, we feel that too. Is that really the same amount of substance that we're looking for?
So you've been talking about from the corporate standpoint. So now let's talk about the rank and file, the folks that work as employees in the organization. Yeah. And it's a big world, and there are a lot of differing views, passions on both sides of every issue. So you're never going to get conformity all around. All right. So how do we navigate that workplace in light of all of the turmoil that goes on? And part of that's stoked by social media and by the news outlets. I mean, let's face it, they're selling soap too. So, we got to contend with that. But look, I want to go to work, and how do I either diffuse potentially awkward discussions? How do I avoid them? How do I approach somebody about something to share my views? What are your thoughts on all that? Because I'm sure you've had clients that have asked that question. How do I deal with this stuff?
Hey, before Lida gives us a common sense answer, Randy.
Okay.
I take my beer back to my office. I don't hang around the water cooler.
But
Lida, I'm sure you got a better answer.
How do you deal with that as an employee? He's got the kegerator right under his desk there, or did you move it? Is it right? It's hiding somewhere.
But it's a serious issue. I mean, this can not only can impact humans' lives, but this can disrupt talent retention. This can destroy productivity, and it can destroy brands.
Well, and I think that having the conversation is a wonderful shift in our environments, right? Having the conversations around inclusivity, diversity, what does it mean for our company, and what are the principles around those topics that we are going to embrace? I'm doing a lot of work within different, DE&I groups, employee resource groups, that are creating space for that. And they're not necessarily trying to solve it. They're just saying, we want people to feel like they have a place here. And if they've got a concern, if they've got an opportunity, we want to embrace that. And I think that's really showing people who might feel on the fringe that there's room to grow. And I've been able to work with some amazing professionals who've said, I don't know if this is my conversation, but I'm intrigued, and I'm an advocate, and I'm an ally, and I want to grow my voice here. And the companies have said, great, you want to take a leadership role, or are you happy to be sort of in the background? And they started having that discussion, because some of these legacy companies, this is all new for them. I think, some of the startups are more comfortable in that space, but I'm seeing such wonderful conversations, whether they're town halls or workshops, where we create conversation and we allow every voice to be heard. And once you put some of that out on the table, everybody sort of calms down a little bit and doesn't feel marginalized. And we don't want people to feel marginalized. And so creating that space, creating the conversation, in a way that's intentional and in a way that supports what the business objective is. Because at the end of the day, these are businesses, and they've got accountability to shareholders and stakeholders of all different kinds. So, it gets tricky. It definitely gets tricky. But
I think what I just heard you say, Lida, is that the organizations that are willing to let their employees have constructive, open conversations without the organization being judgmental to what they hear during real conversations, those organizations are going to be more successful than the organizations that go, shh, we don't talk about that here.
Right. Or we do talk about it, but we haven't really thought it through, and everything we've done in the past contradicts what we're now talking about, and therefore we look opportunistic.
And then there's the other side, Lida. The other side is we do talk about that here, and you better align with the way our organization aligns, or else.
And you know what? A private company is allowed to do that, and people walk with, they talk with their wallets, and they talk with, like you were talking about, talent retention is a big deal right now.
Yeah.
This great reshuffle, great resignation, whatever you want to call it, is showing some really interesting sides of itself right now. And with the economy going where it's starting to feel a little bit like a shell game. And we want to make sure we're making intentional decisions. Employees should know that they align with the values of the people they work with. I mean, when I hire, I talk to people about values, and not just what I value, but, are you comfortable with this? And if somebody's values don't align, it's going to make our experience different, and maybe something I'm not excited about. So
got two things I want to ask you. So I'm going to throw them out there and you tackle one at a time, or however you want to deal with it. All right. So I'm a job hunter, and culture is important to me, and being, feel like I'm affirmed, or, I'm not on the fringe, whatever. So that piece, what are some indicators? What are some things I need to look for? So why don't we tackle that? And the other one, we'll tackle that one. Then the other one is, what if I just don't want to get in these conversations at work? How do I deflect? How do I bow out and deflect and just kind of do my work and not engage? Because I just don't feel comfortable doing that, at least in the workplace. So let's tackle that first one.
Okay.
About I'm a candidate looking for a job. How do I gauge this culture stuff?
Well, so a couple things.
Yep.
I think, first of all, check out their online materials, and do so with a little bit of a skeptical eye, right? Companies promote their mission, vision, values online all the time. I used to write those when I was in-house. So, they're usually based on a lot of conversations. That's part of the equation, but also do informational interviews. Talk to people who work there, who used to work there, who have insight, maybe they're vendors or customers of that company, to get a sense of maybe the company promotes inclusivity and diversity and a community commitment. Ask what that really means. Like, peel those layers back so you get a sense of where the action is tied to those values. Then when you go into an interview, you're able to ask really intelligent questions about the values that you've seen on the website, that were sent in the recruiting materials, because you want to make sure that they're lived and not just marketing speak. Yeah.
All right. So now I'm at work, and Teddy just keeps coming up trying to tell me who to vote for, where to shop, what, where to part my hair. I mean, all of these things. Teddy is a fount of information, and I just, I have to work with him every day. Okay. I have to see him. So it's not like I can hide from the guy. But if I don't want to get engaged and involved in some of these hot topics at the workplace, what are some tips that you could give maybe to help folks feel comfortable and confident in being able to bow out of that and take a pass?
I think as long as you set the guardrails where they feel comfortable for you, and you're consistent with that, whether it's online or in person, I think you're going to be okay. So there are certain topics I don't talk about. I'll talk about them with close friends. I'll talk about them with my family, but they're not part of my brand. And so I don't talk about them publicly. And I've made that known. I've written blogs about it, but we can say to someone, I appreciate you have really strong opinions, and I value the fact you've done your research. I'm not comfortable and I prefer not to engage on those topics. So let's get back to the project. And you just say that over and over and over. And as long as you're doing it respectfully, you're first acknowledging them. Where people will get argumentative is if it sounds like you're holding something back or you're not validating them. So whether you agree or not, whether you think, they're smoking something, you have to validate people. And to say, I appreciate your opinion. I appreciate your feelings. It sounds like you've done a lot of research. I prefer not to have those conversations at work. That's my preference. So let's get back to the project. Let's get back to what we're doing. And the more I hear that, the more consistent that message is, then the more it sounds authentic. Where it gets tricky is you say that to your boss, but then at the water cooler, if you're standing there with Teddy drinking your beer, you're having those political conversations or you're talking about things. And it's like, wait a minute, I thought you told me one thing, which I respect, but now you're doing something different. Consistency is the name of the game.
Good point. There's a question. I'm not sure. Lisa had a question.
Lisa said this, and back into the conversation about discovering the brand and the culture of an organization. She said she tries to ask people during an interview, why are they there? I think she's saying, why do they work at that company? And often she gets a cursory answer, such as they like the location. And I think Lisa's saying not only is that the wrong answer, but it leads her to believe that maybe it's not the right space for her. I believe that's what Lisa referred to.
I mean, I think we have to be good consumers of the places that we align with. Right? If you are going to support publicly an employer or an initiative or a cause or whatever, you have to be really strategic about it. And you can have private opinions. And if you change your mind, here's the other thing, Randy, to that. Mm-hmm. So for instance, I've blogged about the fact that I will not post, you will not see me tagged in photos or anything related to alcohol or drugs, religion, or politics. Does not mean I don't enjoy a nice chilled Chardonnay on a Friday afternoon. I have very strong feelings about my faith and politics. I was a political science major, but I don't talk about those publicly in the public sense because they're not part of my brand. Now, if I decide that I want to change that, if I decide and I make a decision for myself that now I do want to start talking about politics, or I do want to start talking more about my faith, or whatever issues on the other conversation, then I'm going to announce that in some way and start to have that conversation. I'm over here talking about one thing and I'm over here saying I won't talk about that. That's where people get confused, and that's where brands start fracturing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hey, by the way, we're going to ask you toward the end of our show today, as we always do, to ask you to give us some takeaways, some things. If you had to say, here are 3, 4, 5 things you really want people to keep in mind as we march forward, just kind of tuck that thought away. There's a lot going on, and we had an employment attorney on a few weeks ago, and one of the protected classes it's actually not a protected class is politics, but politics has certainly crept into the workplace. And so navigating all of the boundaries and such, and I shared with John, he was our guest, that's got to be an attorney's dream. All the litigation that is coming down the pike in a whole host of ways it's a mess. But thanks again, Lida, for trying to square us away on a few of these things. Some excellent tips. Let's shift to the Gen Z folks, the real young folks coming into this thing. And you mentioned that they're seeking to make their mark. I'm not really sure exactly what that means. What kind of mark are you talking about anyway? And let's from there,
And I love that. I love that about that generation. I mean, and I'm using that generation in a very broad sense, right? Here I am, making a blanket statement, but to have a generation that is concerned about the world that they're living in, concerned about the issues that are important to them, this is no longer the generation that says 25 years on a job and you get a gold watch and, that's your career. They're looking for work that is meaningful, that
Mhm.
ties to mission, which, there's a lot of similarities between this new generation of workers and the military, right? The military is very much the same. They're looking for a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning. I want to know that my work and my life matter. And I think that is raising the bar a little bit for employers. So, if you run a deli or a chiropractic practice or a manufacturing facility, what's the purpose? What are you solving for? And whose life is made better by what you're producing or what you're doing?
Yeah.
Communicating that to your employees makes them all of a sudden find renewed passion for the work that they do. And I love that part.
It's a competitive environment, as we all know, trying to not only attract, but retain employees. And so there's got to be a why.
Yeah.
And it just isn't necessarily a paycheck, because if you can breathe and fog a mirror, you can find a job if you're so open to, to working at whatever that pay might be. But point is, there are a lot of jobs out there. And so why would I stay with a company that doesn't align with my purpose, my values, that kind of a thing? And so it kind of circles back to our talk earlier about companies are almost forced to get off the fence a bit and promote not just our product and service, but what we do for the community, the amount of money we raise for charity, the causes that we support, and so forth. I do find it interesting, and I'm not using Goodwill as an example, but I've worked at Goodwill for 10 years. But there are a lot of companies out there, and again, this is not a Goodwill pro or con, but a lot of companies out there say they do one thing. They give lip service to causes or things they support. And this has been going on for generations. Management, we're not micromanagers. We believe in empowering our workforce. You've heard all that BS for over the years, right? And then you get a micromanager like Teddy Burriss. I mean, how I stay with this guy for 3, I have no idea.
You got 9 minutes, Randy.
But I guess the walk the talk, you mentioned that earlier. And I think regardless of the industry, the size, I think employees are not stupid. You may get misled, so to speak, coming in the door, but you're not going to stay there. You're not going to stay there if the talk doesn't align with the walk. Did I say that right?
You did.
Yeah. You got to be consistent. Be consistent.
And I think companies have gotten smart in the interviewing to ask for that. One of the programs, another program I have on my YouTube channel is a conversation I had with Google. And it was a senior recruiter. And she said something that was so profound, and I've referred to it so many times. She always asks candidates who apply at Google, she says, "Why do you want to work here?" And the response 90% of the time she hears is, "Well, who wouldn't want to work at Google?" Not the right response. Well, what she wants to know is why this job and why this company in this environment. She wants to know that there's a connection, not that your resume will look great if you put Google on it. And I think companies that ask questions like that, it goes the other way, right? I want to know why you're passionate about my mission as a company and how you think you're going to add value. Even though employers are trying to hire right now, they want to hire the right people. It's much more expensive to rehire. So they'd much rather keep somebody who aligns with their values as well.
Absolutely. All right. So I want to, before we get to your tips at the end, the summary, let's talk veterans. I know you're passionate about veterans, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you. So where do you stand on that? You have new books coming out, giving talks? Help fill in the blank here for us.
Well, I've got 3 books that are military related. So I'm kind of feeling like I've checked that box a little bit, but if a new topic hits me for them, I will. I'm a grateful American, and I'm very patriotic. My parents both came to this country from Europe, my mother from communist Hungary. And I grew up knowing that freedom isn't free. And I am so fortunate that I found a way to say thank you by offering and donating and supporting the military. I teach every month at the Air Force Academy down the street from me here in Colorado, teaching, transition skills. I speak, I write for military.com. I am, traveling all over the country. And really what I'm noticing is there's a huge gap when somebody comes out of the military, whether it's been 4 years or 44 years, in what they know comfortably how to do in the civilian sector. And so I'm just one little person trying to make a difference there. So.
Yeah, and you've been doing that for a good while now. And if somebody is watching now, or maybe later they see it or hear it on we have a podcast. I mean, this goes all over the place. If they wanted to reach out to you, I know Teddy, you put it in the chat. Is there what is it? Is it Lida360.com? So if you just happen to be listening and you want to jot it down, it's first name Lida, Lida 360, Lida360.com. And that'll have I guess all the info about books and, different topics if they have questions.
Or LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well. So
I see you on there a lot. So good stuff. All right, we're kind of getting to that point. Unless we have other questions, Teddy, was there anything else that
no, Dean's still hung up on his boss is a Red Sox fan. He's a Yankees fan, but Dean will get past that.
Yeah. Why would anybody not be a Yankees fan? I don't understand.
And we'll get past that. So what?
I mean, it's the Yankees. Like, of course you're Yankees.
I'm a Sox fan, but we're getting our butts kicked this year. So hats off to the Yanks. It may be the Yanks and the Mets Subway Series. Gosh, I hate having to say that. But it could be. All right. Hey, we're at this point where we're going to kind of wind things down here. And if you could, what are a handful or a few takeaways you'd like folks to have as it relates to controlling the narrative, that whole presence and image, things that we need to keep in mind as we go about our day?
Sure. So the first one is think about control, right? Think about managing the way people perceive you. And this isn't to make anybody paranoid or to add extra burdens. Actually, when we start through that lens, then all the self-marketing becomes so much easier. If you're in charge and you're strategic about how you want people to perceive you, how you want them to feel about you and the work you can do and the offers that you have, then what you post on social media, how you dress, who you network with, and how you introduce yourself, all of that is so much easier to solve for if you have a strategy first. The other thing I would point out is personal branding is not about perfection, because we can't be perfect. We're human, but it is about being consistent. So consistency across social media, across the people that you associate with, the language and narrative that you use should all be consistent. They can show different sides of you. I'm a little bit different on Facebook than I am on LinkedIn, but it's still the same person. So consistency is important, as is clarity and confidence. Bring that clarity. People don't have time to figure you out. So when you can say to them, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, and this is the kind of opportunity I'm looking for, you've just given them a gift, and they will take that ball and run downfield and, into the end zone with it. But all roads lead to what you ultimately want to be remembered for. And when I talk about desired reputation, it's sometimes an uncomfortable topic because it does mean legacy. And at a certain point, we're not going to have a chance to do anything about that. So do it now. Think about how you want people to experience you, how you want to show up in the world. And, that Mark Twain quote that I'm always quoting is, there's two important days in your life: the day you're born and the day you realize why. Start today and realize why you're here, and then move everything in that direction. Your conversations, your activities, and your relationships. And watch a new world unfold for you that is so much more meaningful.
Yeah, you've kind of set the course, you've set the path, and you've kind of created for yourself the parameters, the guidelines. And but I guess setting that path and determining, and Teddy, you mentioned this early on, how do you determine what that path should be? And that self-realization, I guess that may be one of the biggest challenges, would be to say, where does it need to be? I don't know, maybe not. Everybody's different. So Lida, thank you very much. It's Lida Citroën. I got it. It almost sounds Italian.
Oh, it's very French. If you know,
or maybe it sounds very French or very Italian. I don't know.
I'll go for Italian. It works for me.
Hey, Teddy,
thanks a lot. Thank you for coming
Lida.
on. Appreciate it. So
not really, Teddy, I don't really have a big old story, but just the whole idea that, we see in the news where people say, even the vice president's wife, Jill Biden, said something that was probably quite innocuous, not intended that way, but yet it's out there and the world sees it. And now it's in the news cycle and they take a beating, and then, we move on to the next crisis. So the idea here is that, kind of I guess when in doubt, leave it out. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that's the way to look at it, but don't get too amped up over a whole lot of stuff. Just kind of let things slide, and just, don't feel like you've got to pound the fist and go, you were at fault, you're my enemy, because nobody gets out of here alive. I'll leave it at that. Teddy, why don't you take it out and also let us know about our next topic, and that's going to be so cool.
So again, Lida, thank you very much for coming on the show again. We really appreciate it. Always great conversations. Our sponsor again is the Elder Law Firm in Greensboro, North Carolina. We're grateful for their support of our show. And next week, our special guest will be Alex Float. And the conversation that actually Alex updated the title. The conversation is Meet a Futurist or a Strategic Foresight and Futurist. So he doesn't have a crystal ball like I do, but he does a lot of foresight, a lot of strategy and thought, and it'll be a great conversation to meet a futurist next week. Again, Lida, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you, Lida.
Randy, good seeing you. We'll see everybody next week.
All right. Be good.
Yeah.
Take care.